Hey Apex Agents, Mobius Y here with another video for Mass Effect Andromeda's multiplayer, coming back from a personal break there. Today's another two-pair character build guide, and we're taking a look at the next ultra-rare character, the Batarian Vanguard. This guy was a lot of fun for me to play. I thoroughly enjoyed using him and figuring out a setup that works for me. Now, this particular setup that I'm going to go over has a heavy emphasis on utilizing this character's melee, because it's just a lot of fun to use it, and it's very powerful, and sports a lot of really good single target burst damage. So this guy excels at taking down bad guys one at a time, taking out huge chunks of their HP pool in a couple seconds. Not a lot of characters can really boast that outside of infiltrators, especially characters that do not rely on doing such high burst damage without their gun. So let's get down right into it. This first part will go over the exact character build guide that I used in the gameplay, which will be in part 2. So if you want to see this character in action at the end of this video, check the link in the description below to take a look at part 2 of today's character build guide. So first we're going to go through the powers, then we'll go over my choice of weapons and equipment and boosters. So first power on the Batarian Vanguard, self-explanatory, it's charge. And I took charge all the way to rank 6 to maximize its effectiveness at keeping this character alive. At rank 4, I went with the radius upgrade. This hits multiple targets within 3.5 meters of your impact point, aka the target that you hit with charge, and it will stagger them so that you get a couple seconds, just a brief second or two, where most enemies are not trying to kill you. At rank 5, I went with weapons and melee to increase the melee damage bonus by 30% for 3 seconds after charging. You do get a slight gun damage bonus as well, which is kind of nice, especially if you're using a siphon variant to try and get back some of your health. But the big factor here is the extra melee damage bonus, since you don't really need to use another power immediately after charging with this setup. So the power synergy bonus at rank 5 is really a non-option with this particular setup, or on this particular character, if you build it even remotely similar. And at rank 6, I did try Shock Trooper once. I didn't really like it as much as I liked rank 6 Bastion. It restores an additional 50% of your shields so that it fully restores all of your shields with a single charge. You get 75 points of damage resistance for 5 seconds after charging, so it makes you a little bit tougher, reducing all incoming damage by less than half, not quite half, maybe about a third. And it increases the damage of charge itself by an additional 40%. So the total damage of charge without additional factors being included, it does 467 damage for 625 newtons of force. That's not too bad. And the base recharge time is 6 seconds, which is fairly impressive. Charge was the first power that I ranked up, and I recommend you do the same thing. Annihilation. This was the last thing that I ranked up. And I'll go over why in a little bit here. Now, Annihilation is one of the more kind of player preference sort of things here. I took it all the way to rank 6 for obvious reasons. At rank 4, I like the extra radius because I want to cause it to, whichever I pick for rank 6, I want that to affect more people within the damage radius. The reason why I don't go with recharge penalty, and you'll see it in the gameplay, is I don't keep Annihilation on as I play. You'll see me do it all the time, where I charge, and then I activate Annihilation, and then I punch somebody in the face. So it takes a little bit more finesse and timing and definitely getting used to it. I don't really want to use the word skill because it's not that difficult. But if you prefer to just run around with Annihilation on all the time, take the rank 4 recharge penalty reduction. Otherwise, your charge is going to have a fairly long cooldown, and you need to try and reduce it as much as possible. So personally, I like the extra radius upgrade so that I can affect more people with the rank 6 option that I prefer. Rank 5, Damage Attractor. Enemies affected take 20% additional damage from all sources. So when you activate this by charging at an enemy, they take 20% additional damage from your melee attack. They take 20% additional damage from Annihilation itself, the damage over time that Annihilation does, and they take 20% additional damage from the biotic combos that you set off by punching things. The nice thing about having Annihilation on is that you have a permanent primer within melee range for this character, which is really nice. And at rank 6, this is personal preference. I've tried both. I do like the Draining Field, partially restores shields for all allies, including the user within 8 meters, when an enemy affected by annihilation dies. So, with the extra radius, anything within the radius of annihilation itself, which is 4.7 meters with the radius upgrade. So if somebody else kills something right on the edge of your annihilation radius, it'll still restore 30% of your shields. But more importantly, if you charge into one person and you punch them to death and they die, if you got shot by something else, if you took damage by anything else, it'll restore 30% of your shields. For the gameplay, I do use the Vortex upgrade. Unarmored, unshielded, normal-sized enemies are lifted into the air for 8 seconds. Each enemy can only be affected once every 15 seconds. Now, for the most part, with the way I use Annihilation in this particular setup, where I'm constantly turning it off and on again to help keep the cooldown of charge as low as possible, Vortex doesn't really affect enemies for very long. However, the simple fact that normal-sized, unshielded, unarmored enemies get lifted up for even a split second, they are still flopping around on the ground, completely disabled and not shooting me for that time period. So I do like the Vortex option just a little bit more. Both are really good for adding survivability to the character. Like I said, this is entirely personal preference for this exact setup. If you decide to copy this or if you want to edit it however you see fit, take whatever you appreciate more. I really do like the Vortex upgrade. It just helps with nuking entire spawns with this character, which can be done. Flat cannon. I had to sacrifice something, and it was flat cannon. It's still okay. It can still help with some area damage. Especially when you're just backpedaling and there's a boss coming after you, for example, a Hydra or a Fiend, or other things. You do get 5 power cells, 4 with the base amount, but you get a 5th one with one of the passive powers. And it doesn't do a heck of a lot of damage. You do get a lot of power damage bonuses in this particular build, but still, it doesn't really do a heck of a lot of damage. You'll still get more damage on a single target, or even a few targets in a small radius with the use of charge. Nevertheless, it is handy to have, as it does stagger a lot of things if they get hit with it. Weapon training. This is a combat passive. Took it all the way to rank 6. You get a lot of power damage and melee damage bonuses with this. At rank 2, you get 15% power damage, which is really nice. 20% melee damage at rank 3. Rank 4, 20% melee and power damage is what I went with, obviously, since this isn't really a weapon-centric setup, so giving up 8% of the weapon damage at rank 4. Rank 5, special combat training. The 50% hover duration and plus 100% weapon accuracy while airborne does sound kind of nice, but isn't really that big of a deal. The big deal here is the plus 50% all combo damage. So whenever you charge at something and you activate Annihilation Field and you punch it, your biotic combo will deal quite a bit more damage this way. Rank 6, Power Specialist, plus 20% power damage. Also, plus 20% weapon weight capacity, which can help if you decide to bring in a much heavier gun. And you get plus 1 to all power cell capacities, meaning that you get an extra power cell with flat cannon. So overall, you get a total of an additional 55% power damage and 40% melee damage, plus that extra 50% all combo damage. So combined, all those together really helps eke out some more damage with this character, especially when you go after a single enemy. And combat fitness obviously took this all the way to rank 6. This can go either way. I like the additional melee damage all across the board because at ranks 1 and 3, you get a total of 25% additional health and shields. You get 30% extra melee damage at rank 2. You can choose an extra 50% melee damage at rank 4. Rank 5, aerial evasion plus 50 points of damage resistance while airborne, and plus 100 points of damage resistance while evading. So when you charge something and you've got those 75 points of damage resistance over the next 5 seconds, that will tack on with another 100 points of damage resistance when you evade, so you're taking less than half damage from all attacks for a few during the course of that evade, while that 5-second extra points from Bastion of Charge is in effect. And you also can take just a little bit less than half damage when you are airborne for a few seconds after charging. And at rank 6, Close Quarters Momentum, you get 5% bonus melee damage per hit. You get 20% bonus melee damage per kill, and all these bonuses can stack up for a maximum of an additional 65% melee damage. Having that ramping melee damage going up and up can really make the difference between one or two shotting even sub-bosses and having to hit them multiple times with several melees or several hits of your powers, or possibly even shooting them with your gun. This effect ends after 20 seconds have passed without a melee kill, so that's kind of why you want to try and focus on taking things out, getting the last hit in, even on boss units, with your melee. So moving on, we'll take a look at the weapons and equipment and whatnot. For the gameplay, I used the scatter shot. I wound up using the scatter shot quite a lot with this guy. I just like not having to visit ammo boxes, which is really handy. And the scatter shot's not a terrible weapon. It does decent damage, has a really high clip size, and it can equip the shotgun melee mod, which is really nice. This will add an additional 33% melee damage when it is at rank 10. That's the common shotgun mod that you can get pretty easily. You could equip one of the other melee damage mods if there is another one. For example, the one that you can get on pistols. But you know, that's entirely personal preference. You could try a host of other shotguns, like some high burst damage shotguns, for example, the Shorty, or possibly the N7 Piranha, maybe even Dan if you want. But as I said, the way this exact setup plays out, I should say, you don't really use the gun a hell of a lot, aside from regenerating health when you're using a siphon variant, trying to keep your health bar up as high as possible. For equipment, I recommend structural ergonomics. Keeping that charge cooldown as low as possible is extremely handy. This will reduce all power recharge speeds by 25%, so this makes it so that I can bring my annihilation back up much more quickly after I disengage the field itself. And for consumables, in the gameplay video, I used a universal power amp and a strength enhancer. This character is the reason I am running low on strength enhancers right now, to be totally honest. For the universal power amp, you could use something else, maybe a biotic power amp if you so chose. But this really only increases the damage of your charge and a slight increase to the damage over time that Annihilation Field creates. So not really an optimal choice, in my opinion. A power efficiency mod is super handy on this character, reducing the cooldown of charge even further. And if you're leveling up the character, of course, you could use something like an experience enhancer, or you could go with a defensive option, throw on a cyclonic mod to just give you a little bit more survivability. Apart from that, I don't really recommend anything else aside from maybe cryo ammo to help deal with armored enemies. Shoot them a few times, debuff their armor effects so that you just take more damage from your other abilities. And that should essentially sum it up. This is a very melee-centric setup because the joys of the Batarian melee is that while it does have a bit of a longer wind-up than a lot of other characters' melees, particularly things like the Omni Blade or the Biotic Punch, it detonates combo primers. So if any enemy gets primed by anything, in this case, 99% of the time, it'll be your Annihilation Field, just punching them will detonate it. You can set off multiple detonations in rapid succession just by repeatedly punching things, which is really amusing. The other aspect of the Batarian Gauntlet Punch is that it actually has really good melee tracking. There's not very many melees that will actually follow an enemy who jumps to your side. The Omni Blade and the Biotic Punch have trouble doing that. A lot of the time they'll miss, but a lot of the cases with the Batarian Gauntlet, more than half the time I've found, more like 3/4 of the time, it'll actually track it and still hit them. So you can still finish them off. Which is really nice. So all of this combined, you charge into something, you hit them for a small amount of damage. If it's a sub-boss, you might take off some of their shields or something. You activate your Annihilation Field, or it's already on, and then you slap them in the face with your big Batarian Gauntlet. Not only do you do a huge amount of melee damage, but you also set off a combo, which does quite a significant amount of damage as well. And in a lot of cases, you can one-hit kill things with this exact combo. Sometimes you have to shoot them a little bit. Sometimes you have to punch them a second time. But if you get that ramping melee damage bonus up as high as it can possibly go with rank 6 of combat fitness, the close quarters momentum bonus, there's a lot of things that you can actually one-hit kill by simply charging and punching it with Annihilation active. Gold class mooks can be killed in a single punch. You don't even have to charge them. So it's very effective, does a lot of damage to a single target, and you can take off a big chunk of health from a very, very low health boss even. You do see me do that in the gameplay, I believe. So that'll sum it up for part 1 of today's character build guide. As I said, for gameplay on gold difficulty, check the link in the description below. And if you would like to see more Mass Effect Andromeda content, feel free to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I upload a new video every Tuesday for Mass Effect Andromeda. This has been Mobius Y for Mass Effect Andromeda's multiplayer. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you on the battlefield. Good luck, Apex.